I'm very glad to be there, and I want to thank very warmly our organizers, Christoph and Carolina. I'm quite excited to be part of this conference. It has good vibrations. I had a little problem. As you can see, I've changed my title, and not only my title, I've changed my whole text, because I had a new ID by coming in the plane yesterday. So that has two consequences. The first one is it's good for our organizers because they will have two texts and not only one. And it's better for you because the text is shorter. So anyway, I want to begin with a little visual enigma. In a conference about archives, we usually see many black and white pictures. And this image helps me to begin with some color. So the most of you shouldn't know exactly what this image shows. Or at least I hope this is the case, because if not, my talk appear as unnecessary. And I hope to explain why what this image shows could bring some important reinterpretation of the photographic practice. So we come back later to this picture. Do anyone understand this picture? Because if yes, I stop. No? All right, that's good. Good for me. So back to black and white. During this conference, we have mainly talked about the archive as linked with history and memory. But there is another way to describe the role of the archive within the photographic context as an instrument to make money, as an economic tool. This kind of description deals with the principle of the image bank, which I take quite literally as a storage, a stock, a place to store items. And this principle of the image bank exists, here it comes, since the very beginning of the photography. And it was William Henry Fox Talbot, the inventor of the negative process, who was the first one to think about marketing a large amount of photographs. Linked with one important aspect of the medium, its reproducibility. This idea to use photography not only to produce single images, but as an industrial tool to market images, was very original, of course, in 1853. It will become commercially more interesting by the end of the 19th century, especially with the apparition of the illustrated postcard. And the 20th century will see a large extent of the image bank, principally through stock photography. There is mainly illustration for advertising and other aims, and press agency, photojournalism, which also developed this tool. So the question is an image bank a photographical archive? If we understand that, if we understand the archive as a tool to retrieve information about historical matters, it is not. Not any image bank was aimed to record historical information, but only to manage a large amount of items. But as a matter of fact, we can see that images banks are commonly described as archive and sometimes as important part of cultural heritage. We are experiencing the end of the French photographic press agencies like Gamma, Sigma, SIPA, which were once the most important in visual journalism. And of course, each time that an agency closes its doors, we can hear discourse to regret the loss of these photographical archives. For a few days, we have learned that SIPA will be acquired by a German group, and its founder, Göksin Sipayoglu, explained that it was a pity that the great heritage of the archive was not taken in account. And one of the greatest image banks, Corbis, founded by Bill Gates, had always pointed out its role in preserving the photographic heritage. So, image banks are not archives. They were always closed collections, ruled by the industrial secrecy, and it is paradoxically only with its end that we perceive it as a part of cultural heritage. As far as it is possible to know or to check, these groups of images are in fact very bad archives, in the sense that there are not good tools to retrieve historical information about pictures. They are not structured, they are not organized through historical principles. But if they are not very efficient regarding pictures' historical information, image banks are, on the contrary, a very good archive of the photographical practices. They show how the romantic image of the photoreporter is a myth that hides the industrial development of photography in the 20th century. Our understanding, not only of photojournalism, but of photography as a whole, is deeply linked with the myth of the photoreporter who brings back from the other end of the world images of distant tragedies performed at the risk of his life. This discourse was repeated again and again by photojournalism since the very beginning of the 20th century. But the first thing you encounter when you have access to the photographic archive of press agencies, like this one of Sigma, which belongs also to Corbis, but is not in Mountain View, but in Garnet, near Paris. What we see is not war photography. What you can see is the quantitative importance of people photography. Here a photograph by Caron. Stars, actresses, politicians, writers, scientists, etc. And this aspect, if we think about it, is quite visible in the press, in magazines. But we don't pay much attention to it because the myth of the heroic photoreporter is the scheme of our understanding of the practice of professional photography. So the collections of image banks can give precious information about the real processes that rule commercial photography. I will show you some of them, three, that are all three illustrations of the process, what is called editing. First one. Oh, that's the city. Well. What you see here is what you see or what you don't see. What is to be seen here are these blue or red marks on the sheet. These are marks for the selection, which is done by an editor That means that when the photographer gives his film, the photographer, in principle, doesn't see these sheets. He gives the film to his own agency. The film will be developed. You have these negative sheets, and then the job began. And it begins by this selection, which is marked, physically marked on the pictures. Here another way to select slides, that's for the slides, it's this red dot. There are two kinds of dots, red dots or blue dots by Sigma. And this selection is a very simple principle. But what you can, what the image, ouais, je vais la montrer comme ça. So this image is something easy to understand. It's an image that had plural marks of selection. It is a picture that was selected 5 times. So you can see the first time was probably the blue dot on the here on the right. The second mark was the red mark. The third one is the green one. The fourth is the violet one. And then there is a last selection, another blue, but with pencil. So this photograph was selected 5 times in its life, so to say, in its photographical life by Sigma. That's a very interesting discovery because we usually think at press photography as something that has only one use. It's linked, of course, with the present, with the actuality, and we think at photographs as something that is used within the realm of the objectivity of journalism, the first time, one time, and then not anymore. But as a matter of fact, if you stored news photographs, then you gain the possibility to use them again and again. And that's one thing you can see in the archives, that these pictures are all very much reused. Here, a very easy example of the here the backside of these pictures, which are all several reproductions of one picture by Caron. And as you may see, each use is a different publication context. And here another easy example, a photograph by Caron of Louis de Funès. And here the caption says it's after his death. Après une carrière de plus de 110 films, etc. So it's, the caption is dated from 1983, after the death of the actor. These are simple examples. What does it mean? It means something quite important. It means that we usually distinguish between stock photography and press photography, thinking that the first one deals with timeless illustrations and the second one with historical news photography. But as a matter of fact, both industries are much closer than we think. Not only because press agency had usually illustration tasks. Here you see an example of the illustration board of Sigma, which is a press agency, so who propose normal illustration, stock photography, and also now, as you know, Corbis or Getty had taken all kind of photographs within their collection and include today in the same set what they call editorial photographs and creative images. So not only because of this mixing of pictures, but because archiving these photographs automatically leads to use them again and again in different publication contexts. So the study of image banks shows a unique industrial logic, which is based on the idea of image as commodity. Second point is also something that we all know, but that we never see. And you don't see it either. I'm sorry. Okay, I have another example. That's a cropping example. Maybe we can see it a little bit more here. So here you have the recto of the photograph. Here, the back, the edited side with indications, captions, copyright, and this indication that's a mark for cropping. That is a picture, but what will be published is only this detail, the portrait of the woman. Okay, nothing special. But that what you see in archives on prints is the mark of the editing. And it is a symptom of the fact, what we easily forget, that a published photograph is always an edited image. That means the result of a process of selection, cropping, editing, sometimes retouching, where the author has usually not his word. Photographs in the press are not the same as the originals taken by the author, the photograph. They are the result of this process. And the study of the archive shows that it is the editor who can be considered as the real author of what we are seeing, but it is an invisible author, never mentioned, to maintain the illusion of the objectivity of the photograph. Third example, also very simple, is indexing. Another part of the edition process, the fact that any photograph in these archives come together with the text, with a caption. More or less extent, it depends. You can have captions that are quite an article. And that is, of course, a very important remark that press agency, like stock photography, don't sell only pictures. They sell pictures and the information on pictures. And that was one important conclusion by Matthias Brun, that the idea of stock or press photography, information is more important than the picture itself. More than images, banks are tools to store information about pictures. And it is this complex process through the whole 20th century that brings very naturally to the digital revolution. So the idea that what is important by photographs is information, metadata, keywords, brings to a very normal evolution from argentic photography to digital photography. Okay, to conclude, there is much information stored in image banks, information about how photography became an industry. By looking at these collections, we inverse the signal-to-noise ratio. What was the signal become the noise? That's the image. And what was the noise, the archiving, become the signal. So we transform the old way to see the photograph as an archive into a clue where the archive gives us a new image of photography. Thank you very much.
Thank you, André, for that timely reminder that the archive is an economy, and not just a discursive economy, but also a commodity economy, and therefore a place of work, not just semantic work, but actually a complex division of labor that then must complicate any discussion of authorship or of meaning within that framework. So we have perhaps 5 minutes time for some questions to André.
Thank you, and thank you for a very inspiring presentation. Actually, I would like to combine the two presentations, and well, there will be a question to you, but referring to the first presentation, because actually all the process of making a photograph into an archive that you have presented is operating on physical presence of a photograph, while when we edit digitally, it is not there. So how would you match the two ways of editing? Is it possible to make a digital photograph into an archive in the sense you have presented?
It's a good question. I guess I cannot answer to it rigorously, because, as you have seen, what I presented here are mostly examples of archiving within the argentic era. That's the traces we have as historians. For the moment, I don't have much information about the digital processes within the redactions, how it works, how it goes. It's the beginning. So it is not easy for me to answer, because I don't have the elements, I don't have the information. What seems is that there is a very great continuity between the old processes, physical or physically visible, and the digital mastered one. As it's always, Photoshop is a tool that, if you use it, it imitates all the tricks, cropping, etc., that were done before physically. So, like, it's not only the case of Photoshop, of course. Any application, you know, when you on email you have the picture of a stamp, and okay, so that's not a new story, but I think that there are much more similarities than basic abstract differences.
Nina wants to comment on this one.
Yeah, I thought I would comment, having some experience of how editing is done digitally on newspaper picture desks, for example. And you're absolutely right. The software does, to a certain extent, mimic the old ways, in the sense that you receive the photographs from the agencies in a kind of matrix that, to some extent, mimics the contact sheet. But you get just so much more and it kind of rolls across your screen all day. What does happen with that is that because you don't use a loop much on the screen, you have to click to open pictures. And in order for them to be interesting, they must be able to grab your attention at sort of thumbnail size. And so something that, I mean, what may be a consequence, and what I know my previous colleagues in picture editing and picture researching are telling me is that more and more they see that photographs have to be in a certain way, have to have very striking elements that are visible in a very small scale in order to be selected. So the editing process does, I think, change, and the production process changes in the sense that eventually photographers catch on that you know, every photograph kind of has to be a visual high concept photograph and has to kind of jump out at you from a really quite small scale on screen. So that's a comment.
It can go also the other way around, in the sense that, for instance, with all digital process, what we see that what is very important is the dimension of transmission. And that was not something to which we were very attentive before. But with that new question, what's about transmission? We can also ask this question to the old processes, and then we see new things, new evidences that the question of transmission was already there, and was, of course, very important. You can write a whole history of press photography within the 20th century with only that criteria. But nobody did pay attention to it till now.
Let's just take one more question. This will, I'm afraid, have to be our last.
Dziękuję za ten referat. Czekałam na może nie pytania, tylko dwie uwagi. Pierwsza właśnie dotycząca przesyłów. Pierwsza właśnie dotycząca przesyłów. W Polsce dzisiaj reporterzy...
Yes, fine. Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that presentation. I was waiting for someone to address this subject. I have two comments. In Poland today, photojournalists usually use digital, and that's an interesting phenomenon, because whenever something interesting happens, you see a race against time, a cosmic race against time, where photographers take photos in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the event, like a photo op or so on, and then they rush off to one side, they cover their heads with a cloth or with a coat, and log on to send their photo to the agency. This is good in a sense, because they can control, they do the first editing, the first choice of the best shots, and they send their best shot. And it's a first come, first serve, so the quicker you send your photo to the agency, then the agency has priority. But the second thing, you mentioned these great image banks in Poland. We've also lost a lot of archives of newspapers, press and agency archives, which were taken over, bought out. And I know this is happening around the world. Russian archives, for instance, have been purchased either by Getty or Corbis, I'm not sure. And when you open a paper, the Sunday papers, you get a beautiful photograph of Anna Akhmatova by Applebaum from the 1930s, and it's signed Corbis or Getty, whatever. I don't really remember. So what is this? It's falsifying the history of photography, because somebody who isn't familiar with the subject will say, oh, okay, a reporter from an agency, a US agency, went to the Soviet Union in the 1930s and took a photograph of Anna Akhmatova. And an even more shocking, I think, example was last year. Last year I opened Newsweek magazine. There was an article by some historian about an attempt to escape from Auschwitz, a concentration camp, and it was one of the 4 frames that exist in the Auschwitz Museum, one of the 4 photographs showing the burning of the corpses, the crematorium, a unique photograph, although actually there was an entire book written about these photographs of the Auschwitz crematory, and this photograph is signed Corbis or Getty or something. And this is truly shocking, because you might think, oh, okay, so an agency just sent a guy over to Auschwitz to take a couple of photographs, and that's how we got this image. And that's a process that I'm observing, a process of falsifying the history of world photography.
You describe it very well, and I cannot but agree to this statement. What it shows is that photography has nothing to do with authenticity. It has to do with economy, at least in the realm of press, media, and agencies. And it was always the case, because, as you know, photographs are signed by their author only since the 60s or 70s. And before the name, the copyright was the copyright of the media, of the journal, for instance. So it came quite late, and now it goes back. We have this regression. Digitization of collections of the old archive is a catastrophe, because there are so much loss. Selection of images, of course, and within images, one of the biggest problems is that you need only one original. So when you have 20 prints that tells a story, when a photograph exists in 20 reproductions, that is a whole story of a publication within years. But of course, for the digitization, you choose one, and then the rest disappear. And okay, it's a big issue. We will have many problems with that. Not only the public, but as historian, it's of course a very difficult problem.
Thank you, André, and indeed, thank you to all our panelists, very much indeed. And we have time for a very short break before the 3rd session on the archive looking awry.